Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be looking at the weekly metagame breakdown for the standard best of 3 traditional standard. We're going to be looking at the best decks up to Mythic Rank. We're going to be focusing on the Diamond to Mythic Rank window or rank kind of range, given that it's about 2/3 of the month, and then next week we'll just do Mythic only as folks kind of jostle for their final top 1200 position. This weekend also is the best of 3 qualifier play-in, as well as the qualifier itself, the qualifier weekend for standard. So it gives you some ideas. We'll be back later in the week. I'm going to do an analysis on the MTGO side, see what's happening in terms of those MTGO tournament meta. So we'll cover you from all angles, Arena ladder, MTGO, everything like that. We're going to be looking at Untapped right now today. Companion tool tracks user win rates, gives a whole bunch of cool stats. We will leverage that in terms of giving us a distribution of what decks are doing well and kind of going from there. I'm actually going to be doing a giveaway, so I have a pre-release code for 6 packs of Foundation. Notably, you can only get 1 per account now. They reverted back where you can do like 5 or 6. So I went to 2 pre-releases. I have a second one, so I'm going to give it away to someone. The way to enter, just drop a comment with your favorite card from Foundations. I will randomly select someone and then contact them to give them the code. Again, this is only if you haven't used a pre-release code. If you've used it, it's not going to work. So drop a comment with that there. So we are going to go ahead and look at the metagame popularity. Right now, Golgari is the most played deck from Diamond and Mythic at about 14.5%, just a shade under 15. The Dimir Midrange piles are just a shade under 10%. Mono Red at 8. Boros Burn at 8. Oculus at about 6. We have Domain at about just a shade under 5. Mono White just a shade under 5. And Orzhov Bats at 2.5. We look kind of the distribution. Dimir Midrange was upwards of like 25%. We see it kind of drop down, so about a 15% drop. Mono Red making up about 20% earlier in the month, and then seeing them kind of drop down to single digits. Golgari kind of climbing. The Gruul Aggro list kind of falling off in lieu of kind of Mono Red. And having played a lot of these Gruul decks and Mono Red, for me at least, Golgari is one of the harder matchups just because they present a lot of removal along with a lot of creatures that can kind of block. Like Blissa kind of goes out of control, all the removal they have the demons now, stuff of that nature. So we'll look in terms of the games themselves. So we have Diamond Mythic Rank, 30,000 games played. So the highest win rate deck, we'll jump into it, is a Mono Red Aggro deck. This particular variant is really all over the place. I would not suggest this one here. Someone's winning with it. They might be a newer player, lower MMR. It seems like kind of a collection mishap, like 2 Swiss Spears, but Emberbirth, Veteran, whatever this card is, Barb Fist, not the greatest. So we're going to look at this version here, which is more of a stock list. 72% win rate, about 50 games played. Big change here, Burst Lightning coming into the main over Shock. This version's opting to still play the full Lightning Strikes. Some folks, and like I've been trying out a 2/2 split of Shock Lightning Strike, just having an early answer is important, with it being 2 mana. Just in these mirrors, you want to be able to answer your opponent's threats. Outside of that, it's a pretty stock list. You're basically playing a mouse package, very aggressively slanted in the main, with Screaming Nemesis as your 3-drop. One thing that I think some people miss at sometimes, you can use this Witchstalker Frenzy to target your own Screaming Nemesis to redirect the 5 damage to your opponent. So any of this cheap burn, if they're going to kill your Nemesis, you might as well just point the burn at your Nemesis and then get them so they can't gain life. You basically just redirect. Burst Lightning would still do 2 to their face, but this way here it deals 2 to Nemesis, then Nemesis deals 2 to their face and shuts off the life gain. But you can attack, and then after damage, you can basically fling 5 damage at your opponent. This version here has got 2 Lithomantic Barrage, 4 Torch the Towers, 4 Twisted Fealty, so blue-white matchup, blue-black matchup potentially. Torch the Tower is good here against the small kind of aggro mirrors. The one thing I've been considering as well is maybe shifting this to Scorching Dragonfire, because at times they can get these out of the torch range and you don't have much bargain fodder in this build. So that could be something with the Exile, or Obliterating Bolt is something else to consider. Sometimes you'll see, like I've been playing the 4th Witchstalker in the side. This one's just going full set of fealty. Interesting, this one here is only got 2 Forges. I usually like to keep at least 3. This one's opting for 3 Sunspine Links. against the Dimir decks, against the Golgari decks, anything with like greedier mana bases and life gain. The one thing though, okay, so this one is on 21 lands versus the stock 22. So that's another kind of consideration there. Sorry, stock is 20 lands usually. So it makes it a little bit easier to cast the 4-drop in the side, but you can kind of play around with these numbers based on what you're encountering. Next deck is Dimir Midrange, 71-4. So there's a few different variants of these Dimir Midrange. There's kind of these tempo flash versions. I tried out during Metagame Challenge a flash version with Brineborn Cutthroat and Spectral Sailor. They felt so much worse than just these stock versions without bats or like Unstoppable Slasher, stuff like that. They just don't feel as like, even this just kind of setting up your draws felt so much stronger. This one here, basically you play a tempo game, which means in some games you're the aggressor, some you're the control deck, some you're playing a mid-range deck. You can cheat into play Kaido with all your cheap flyers and kind of beat them down that way. Enduring Curiosity draws you a bunch of cards. Slasher is kind of a removal magnet that keeps coming back. Tidebinder for activated abilities, then just a whole bunch of removal. Anoint, go for the throats, cut downs, cheap counters with Phantom Interference, 3 steps ahead. Good early, good late, kind of all the modes can be useful in there. And then you have just more cheap removal, Duress for the mid-rangey matchups, Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate, more cheap removal and Anoint. Big mana decks, you have counters, Blot Out for big demons or stuff like that. Tishana's Tidebinder for activated abilities. Some Shellies for the mid-rangey matchups, also reasonably well against like mono red and stuff like that, just being a wall. Stuff like Kaido gets a little worse against mono red, so you can play like the Sheoldreds, Ix Command as a sweeper. We then go to Druid Burn. So Gruul Burn, 67%. So the core of this deck is a mono red deck that is more burn prowess oriented than the mouse package. So you do have some overlap, Hired Claw, Swiss Spear, Slick Shot in this one, given that you're more prowess oriented. And then the only green card in the main is Questing Druid, which is used for the Seek the Beast ability to draw you a bunch of cards. So this kind of refills your hand. You're seeing the Burst Lightning as well as Shock package. One of Kellen in here, just as a Grizzly Bear that could be a mana sink. I wouldn't play more than one of it. And then Bolt Wave as an additional new burn spell in the deck. A couple Restless Bridge lines in the mana base. Graveyard Hate and Ghost Vacuum, Paw Patch Formation, deals with enchantments, deals with all these flying demons going around. And then worse, like the failsafe mode on this versus like pick your poison is at least it draws you a card if needed. Pyroclasm for go wide decks, Case for the grindier matchups, Twisted Fealty for big like Golgari matchups, big demons, stuff like that. Steal their Archfiend the Dross, hit him for 6, Witchstalker Frenzy for removal. Then go to Jeskai Convoke, so 66%. We have the Clockwork Percussionist being another artifact that can be targeted, provide some card advantage. Mockingbird can copy some of your creatures. Kind of nice with Mockingbird, can copy Imidanes to get that effect again. A couple copies of Sheltered by Ghost in here as some removal and lifelink. But the core of the deck, you're trying to play out things that make artifacts, Novice Inspector, Spyglass Siren, Gleeful Demolition them, and then convoke out things like Knight Errant for more value, or more creatures, or Warden to get bigger. You also have one of the rooms here, so Defaced Gallery, the right-hand side, just makes an anthem for your team when they attack, and then Painter's Studio can provide some card advantage. In the sideboard, just situational removal, barrages, torches, destroy evil for bigger stuff. You have some counters in Disdainful Stroke and Protect the Negotiators for the bigger mana. Sweeper decks, Get Lost, Soul Partition as more removal. You'll sometimes see things like Forge in these decks. You'll sometimes see things like Lightning Helix as another way to have situational removal that also works with the life gain. We then go to Dimir Demons. This is the Worlds list that won. So this is the combo variant. So you cast Doomsday Excruciator and then you either mill them out with Jace, or you can mill them out with the Restless Reef in that case. The rest of the deck is an assortment of removal spells. Cutthroats, Shoot the Sheriffs, Cut Downs, Duresses, Anoint. You do have a bit of a creature package, Caustic Bronco. Not many ways to crew it, so do watch out because you can easily take 9 or 8 damage off revealing your room since it counts both sides of the room. Archfiend is another way to play with the demon package. Some games you're just going to beat down with demons, like kill everything, throw an Archfiend down, and kind of solo it that way. Sideboard, you usually see this more with like the pro lists, that there's a lot more one-ofs. or 2 ofs as opposed to, you know, 3, 4 ofs. Cut downs, cheap removal, Dreams of Steel and Oil comes in. So think of it like Duress, but sometimes for more creature decks. This is actually really good against mono red because it can take their creatures, but it can also take their forges. So something like that. Duress is also incidentally pretty good against the burn decks since they're so spell-based focused. Anoint for removal that exiles, negate cheap counters, outrageous robbery for the mid-range matchups, the Lily for the mid-range matchups. Render inert basically says I take all the counters off your Archfiend Dross and now it dies, and you lose the game because it has no more oil counters on it. Withering Torment, enchantment or creature removal, Jace for the more mid-rangey matchups, domain matchups, stuff like that. You could just play a mill game. Deadly Cover Up, Gix Command as sweepers. We then go to Golgari Midrange. This one's at 63.4. So Llanowar Elf came into the format. If you want the cool anime art, it's only 1,000 golds to pick up. This one's a little bit more mid-rangey focused. We see Sentinel of the Nameless City in here, a 3-2 split of Archfiend and Shieldred. We have the Unholy Annex on the top end, a 1 of Virtue. This is like the more creature focus. So Broncos, Mosswoods, and then a bunch of cheap removal to kind of offset it. Terra Sunder, really flexible card in this meta. You have like the Restless Cottage, Demo Field in here. Cavern can name Demon, can name Phyrexian as needed, kind of mixed into there. Sometimes you'll see like Fountain Port in these lists as well as a utility land. Hand Hate, Graveyard Hate with Scavenging Ooze, Blot Out for big demons, stuff like that. Lily for the mid-range matchups. Maelstrom Pulse was reprinted. So this is just a flexible spell. Hits multiple demons, for example, multiple Unholy Annexes, a bunch of tokens. If they have something, there's kind of a funny combo I saw, like Jaffer, another content creator. He had Archfiend the Dross out against Domain. They cast Herd Migration, then he Maelstrom Pulsed one of the tokens, and they just took like 12 damage off the Archfiend. Harvester in here for like the go wide decks, Vivian and Nissa for kind of the grindier matchups. We go to Zur Domain, 63%. So you're playing a package of the Overlords, Flood Pits for card draw, Hauntwoods for card advantage, Mistmoors for tokens, Leyline Binding as another cheap removal, and then Zur can animate them. You get the attack trigger from them since they're animated as creatures, and then you gain some life, hexproof, a whole bunch of... This one's really... I keep losing to this deck from the mono red position. They always, like, consistently are turn 3ing this, turn 4ing this with the mana to activate it and just getting me like every single time, no matter what. You know, kind of revisionist, but it just feels like that every single time I play this against this deck. Scroll Shift is another way you can blink your creatures, so you can cast it for its cheaper impending cost, blink it, and then get it back into play. Cheap removal kind of mixed in of Get Lost, Temporary Lockdown to store up the early game. Also Smite as cheap removal, along with Not on My Watch for the aggressive decks, Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate, Doppelgang for the mid-rangey mirrors, Negate for kind of the mid-range control matchups, Paw Patch, flexible removal, and then Temporary Lockdown again for the aggressive decks. Boros Burn, 63%. So the thing that will beat Boros Burn more than anything is its mana base. You got to play Thran Portals. Any deck that has to play Thran Portal is naturally going to hate its mana base. The Biovac's been pretty good, like in the Boros decks I've been playing. It's been a reasonable creature land. This deck here, by going Boros, so it's similar to the Gruul version. No questing Druid, but you have like your Bolt Wave, all your kind of burn package. The only one drop here is the Swift Sphere, but you have Helix and Boros Charm that works there. With the Boros Charm, you can give Indestructible to a creature, you can give it double strikes, with a big slick shot, you can do it that way, or it's just default mode, deal 4 to the opponent's face. So Pointing Burn to the face, Lithomantic Barrage, blue and white kind of based creatures. Beza is a great target for something like this. Destroy Evil for bigger things and enchantments, Pyroclasm for go wide decks, Twisted Fealty for demons, big stuff, Forge for kind of the grindier matchups, and then Witchstalker Frenzy for big removal decks. Oculus, Azorius Oculus, 63%. So this one here, they're trying out some variation of numbers of Cure in here. This plays to the effect of being a 3-drop that can be reanimated, cares about having cards in your graveyard, can give you some value, and in itself draws discards with your original package of Oculus and Haughty Djinn. You'll notice Into the Flood Maw has been replaced with Unsummon. So Big difference here into the Flood Maw, while it's more versatile in being able to hit a number of your opponent's permanents, it cannot target your own stuff. Unsummon can bounce back your own stuff. So if they're going to kill one of your creatures, exile it, you can bounce it back to hand and save it. Otherwise, it's pretty stock list. Bunch of card draw, put cards into your graveyard, bring back these creatures with Recommission or Helping Hand. Stroke for big mana stuff, Exercise, Artifact, Enchantment, or Big Creature Hate. Get Lost as removal. This version's also playing 3 copies of Sheltered by Ghost. In the aggressive matchups, can be a life gain enabler. It's also a way to kind of provide some protection from your creatures. Negates 1 of Monastery's Mentor. So usually if they go heavy on Graveyard Hate, you can go an alternative route because it could shut down something like Rest in Peace, messes up these creatures. So you go Mentor instead. The failsafe is you hard cast it, go wide. I wouldn't mind seeing like another copy of that probably on the side. Split up as cheap sweepers along with temporary lockdown. Mono white control, so token control. This is built around Caretaker's Talent as well as Enduring Innocence. Draws you cards when tokens come into play. You make tokens with like Carrot Cake, Elspeth, Beza, anything like that. Virtue, Overlord, draw a bunch of cards. Fountain Port gets you value. This one's straight mono white, so you get Lay Down Arms as a cheap removal, along with Get Lost and Soul Partition in that respect. Authority, really strong against Forges, really strong against any sort of red-based or aggressive strategy. Smite, cheap removal. Exercise, Artifact, Enchantment, Big Thing Hate. Rest in Peace for graveyard decks. Split up, temporary lockdown as sweepers. Boonbringer Valkyrie against the aggressive decks. Comes in and kind of beats them up that way there. We have Temur Prowess. So this is the Otter combo, 61%. So how it works, you got Valley Floodcaller. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can basically untap your, in this case, rats or otters that care about in this deck here. With Enduring Vitality, they tap for mana. So you basically can tap, untap as you chain together spells, and you can generate a whole bunch of mana, churn through your deck. There's a way with the Town Ain't Big Enough, targeting something like Up the Beanstalk and Storm Chaser's Talent. You return them back to your hand. If you have enough creatures, you can generate enough mana to just keep recasting them up the level to level 2 of the Storm Chaser's Talent. Get back This Town Ain't Big Enough. Keep doing it till you basically draw through your deck. And then you play with a bunch of mana, Song of Tokenzan, to haste out your team. Makes you a bunch of tokens, or this just inherently makes your creatures bigger in that respect. Graveyard Hate into the Flood Maw, cheap removal, kind of blow up hate pieces if needed. Abrade as removal, various counters, Paw Patch we've mentioned a number of times, Up the Beanstalk for the grindier matchups, Nemesis for anything that's doing any sort of life gain, Dissection Tool for the aggressive decks, and Roaring Furnace as another creature removal. The Nemesis is also really good against just like red-based aggro. It's like a 2-for-1 in most cases. Orzhov Bats, 58%. So people are trying out the combo, the Enduring Tenacity as well as Bloodthirsty Conqueror. This creates an infinite loop that drains your opponent out of the game. You just need to either need to gain a life or have your opponent lose a life, and then they'll instantly lose, provided that they can't disrupt one of the pieces in response. You have Elenda Saint of Dusk. 4 mana 4/4, lifelink, hexproof from instance. This is a good card to check state-based conditions. So if this attacks and it's a 4/4 and it pushes you above your starting life total, after combat. So if it blocks with like say it attacks into a 4/4, they would normally trade, but because your life total is higher, it actually makes it a 5/5, so it sticks around. If you're up to 30 or more life, it becomes a 10/10 with Menace, I believe. Or no, it gets Menace if you have 21 to 29 life, and then it becomes just even bigger. Enduring Innocence draws you cards. You have the Amalia Bat kind of combo, as well as Essence Chandler and Rune Lurker. One thing to note, Amalia actually blows up your combo. So it might be something you might want to consider not including, because once you start doing the loop, once you get 20 counters on this, it could blow it up. So just be mindful of that when you're kind of playing out, depending on your opponent's life total. Cheap removal, Sheltered by Ghost, stuff like that. Authority for the aggressive decks, to rest for hand hate, Annoying for cheap removal. Exercise we mentioned. Invasion is kind of a Thoughtseize style effect you can protect your stuff with. Blot out for big things. The End for kind of combo stuff. We got Gruul Ramp. So this was a cool one as well. So it is playing the Smuggler's Surprise, cheat into play stuff, give it haste. Ideally what you want to do is get the Calamity into play, and then you could saddle it. If you saddle it, you get 2 copies of that saddled creature tapped and attacking, or you choose a creature to copy. So you can copy like Overlords, you can copy Vaultborns, you got a whole bunch of stuff you can copy. But it's like a ramp deck. You got Overlords in here, Glimpse the Core, now Atlanta War Elf in here. So ramp early, you got a cheap removal, and then play your big stuff on the top end. Your sideboard has got like Graveyard Hate, Litho, Barrage as cheap removal, along with like Pyroclasms, Obliterating Bolts, Beanstalk for the grindier matchups, gets you some card draw. Brotherhood's End is another sweeper, and Throwback for Artifact Enchantment Hate. So 2 more decks from the community, just want to show off. There's this one is from Cowboy Crypto, 10 and 2. They got into Mythic. This is mono Black Demons with the combo included of Bloodthirsty Conqueror, Enduring Tenacity, Bloodletter, Unstoppable Slasher kind of combo with Annex in here as well. Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hates, like basically what we've been covering in a lot of these decks, but mono Black Demons, if you want to start building towards Golgari or Dimir, but you don't have all the cards, this could be something to consider. However, this doesn't necessarily overlap with the Golgari package if you don't own these. Typically, Bloodletter is only featured in the mono Black variants. And then we have 16 and 10. So not the biggest record, Magus of the Frog, but Temur Merfolk. This one seems like a fun deck to maybe try out if you have the cards. So Merfolk Tribal, Valdaean Hexcatcher is a lord for your Merfolk. Could be Counterspell. Flood Pit Drowner, incidentally, is a Merfolk. Deeproot Pilgrimage, whenever your Merfolk taps, you get to create a Merfolk, so some value there. Once per turn, you have just a bunch of cheap Merfolks. The Lord effects, Counterspells, you can flash up stuff. Enduring Curiosity provides you card advantage. Nikazel, whenever a creature you control explores a land, you may put that land from your hand onto the battlefield tap. So it's a ramp, and then just gives it some counters when you explore, so kind of that theme. And then just a bunch of cheap kind of counters. Aetherize for the aggressive decks. Pick your poison in here. Flood Maw, Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate kind of shenanigans. So for the week, let me know what you think, what you've been playing. And like I said, if you want to enter the giveaway for the pre-release packs, just drop a comment with your favorite card from Foundations. Catch you next time. Thanks for watching.